Hey, this is Third Sun. We're in my studio in London today, and we're going to be talking about my track Counterculture. Well, yeah, I usually start each track with a sort of basic theme or sort of something like a catalyst to kick everything off. So that can be anything from a short melody or a little motive or a kick itself. So I think with this one, I mean, it's pretty much sort of low end orientated. So I imagine, yeah, I probably did start with this kick and really focus on that kick and bass relationship. So yeah, if I can walk through the kick here. So I usually layer my kicks with a sort of, so I'll have like a low end. I think this one I probably got, yeah, it says DSM, so this is from a DSM sample pack where I just dropped it into a sampler and then started playing with it, and already you can hear, you know, already that's inspiring to me in a way, just because it points me in a certain direction. That might change over the course of the track when sort of synths come in and different percussive ideas. You sort of want to, you don't want to force anything in a certain direction. You want to keep it open and be open-minded. But I think with this one, yeah, it was very much kick focused. So I would have just dropped a bunch of different kicks in here and played them against each other. So let's see what else we've got here. So we've got a high sort of mid-range kick, and then a really woody. So yeah, if I was to drop that in, I would already have an idea of what I wanted to do with the track in a way. So if you play those together, I think that rhythm as well is quite march-like. So I'm already going to be thinking in a certain direction. So yeah, I try not to process things too much. Just sort of functional cutting. Of course, the low end, you really want that low to shine through. The top end, you want to make sure all of the low is really cut, so there's no bad interactions there. So we've got three main kicks here. The top end too are really, yeah, you can see there's no low end at all there, so that's really important. And there's no real other processing going on there. Just a limiter to increase the volume a little bit. Or I could have used a utility there to increase the gain. But then that all goes through into a bus, or I've just grouped it here, and then we add a little bit of color. So here I've got just the sausage fattener, which is really, I think it's amazing. It's so simple, but it really tightens things up, but you can also make things a lot fatter and get a lot more volume out of them. So yeah, running that through the sausage fattener. And I've actually just noticed I've got another kick here, I think. Let's see what that's doing. Yeah, that's just adding a little bit of reverb, which is a typical techno trait, I guess, having that boomy reverb in the kick in the low end. In this case, it's really just the mids, so it's not giving too much energy in the lows. If we play them together, yeah, you can hear it's really adding almost just a little bit of atmosphere in the background. And I've also got, so I think I've got about 10 kicks going on here. But there's also this little click with a 707, which I use pretty much in every track. It's just so nice, and it adds a little punch as well. You can hear if I play those two together and without. And that click, of course, is really important to punch through every other element. So we really need to hear that kick come through. And then that then goes through to a kick and bass bus, which I've got lined up here. So if I just quickly talk about the bass, and that's the bass in this track is actually just a tom. It's you can hear it's sort of creating a bit of groove and a bit of rhythm with the kick. When you play it together, it's adding almost a little bit of swing in there. So that's not too processed either, just really basic cutting. There's quite a lot of sidechain going on there, just so, I mean, obviously you don't want it to interact with the kick, but it's adding a feel, this sidechain, because it's so heavily sidechained. You can hear without the sidechain, it sounds more like a drum now. So it's almost changing the texture of the sound, I think. And something else I do with my sidechains is always have a look ahead of 10 milliseconds, just so it's completely avoiding that kick before it even comes in. I find that really useful. Without the look ahead, sometimes you get that clicking sound, so it's kind of quite important to have that on, I think. And then also I've just got a saturator on here, which just warms it up. So without the saturator, and with the saturator, yeah, it adds a lot of volume too. But with a bit of drive, I got 5 dB of drive on here, so it's just warming up that low end. So yeah, the tom is just an 808 tom. This is a standard 808 tom that I've pitched. So it's been transposed 14 steps, so we can go back and hear the tom. So this is the tom completely, well, almost untreated. This sounds like a standard tom because it's just a standard 808 tom. So with the EQ, the compressor, and then transposing it down, it becomes more of a sort of groovy bass line. If we go into the clip itself, it's quite a sort of, I don't know how to say, sort of percussive, almost Latin type rhythm. I guess there's not much, there's no actual swing being added here. If I wanted to add a bit of swing, I could have just moved these slightly to the right, so then we would have had a bit more of a loose feel to it. But I think here I kept it straight, and then the sidechain is adding all of that sort of swing because it's coming in slightly early, and then the release is popping off really quickly. So I think that's adding enough groove, and playing it together, you really hear that. So that goes through to the kick and bass bus, which I've processed with a glue compressor, just the native Ableton glue compressor. That's not doing too much. It's just, turn it down a little bit. It's just adding a little bit of pressure there. It's at 20% on the dry wet. So I'm actually just using the punch and parallel. So it's parallel compression. So you add a little bit of pressure, but it's not pulling it down too much. Then that's running through into the Slate Digital Virtual Mix Rack, which I love. You can do everything with this thing. You can add bass, add tops, compress, saturate. There's some quite extreme saturation and compression you can do with this thing as well. For this instance, I've just dropped in the Earth sort of EQ, so I'm just boosting that very low. Let's have a listen without, and then with. So I'm just clicking off and on there. You can't hear too much going on, but it's just adding that little bit more sub. It's just that little pressure that's helping, I think. And that's running through into the API 2500 from Waves, which I really like. And I use this on all of my kick drums. And here I'm just using the preset, which is, so I scroll down to Drew Levine mastering, Levine modern mastering glue. And that's the preset I use, and it really brings it to life. I mean, it adds a little bit of volume, but that's without, and that's with. So you're getting a bit more volume, but it's also just gluing it together, and it's just really like helping it stick. Yeah, you can hear they're just really dancing around each other nicely, I think. That's without. they're having a good time. They're enjoying each other now. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've done on the kick and bass bus. Like I said, I don't like to go too crazy with the processing. I think the more you process something, the sort of more degraded the sample gets, I guess. That doesn't happen as much with digital processing, but I think it still happens. You want to focus on really good source material, so you have really good samples, and that's when the magic happens. I wouldn't worry too much about getting into really crazy, complicated processes and stuff. I think it's really important to just focus on your samples. So yeah, that's the kick and bass pretty much. Okay, so just opening up this hat group here. We've got this little rhythmic idea, which is kind of the rhythmic backbone of the track. Everything sort of bounces off that. So this is a hat from a sample pack. This is JES sample pack. I don't think it's too different from a regular hats like a 909 or even a 707. But I think I've processed it here with the vocoder, which is adding quite a lot of white noise to it. And that just creates a sort of rough and ready sound to it. I think I've first cut it here with the EQ, a just basic stock Ableton EQ, and then I've added the VBC from Slate Digital, which is an amazing compressor. It really brings everything to life. I think the mids and the highs you get a lot of life from with this. So I think I add that to anything from synths, percussion, other drums. So that's usually on my channel buses, and then back to this vocoder where it's adding that rough white noise. So that's just on the noise parameter there. Again, this is just the stock Ableton vocoder. But you can see when we're coming towards this little break here with this build, the release on the vocoder is increasing. So we're getting an intensity from the white noise. It's just increasing more and more. We're breathing in, and we get a little release there before the actual drop comes. So I use that a lot, that little vocoder trick. And then just sort of a counter rhythm to that is this basic shaker idea, which is reinforced with this. Sort of like a sliding hat sound. It's quite an interesting one, I think. Again, this is from the same sample pack, the JES sample pack. And I've just dropped it into this sampler here and just processed it with a bit of overdrive. And like I said, it's sort of bouncing off this idea quite nicely. It's creating that, I guess, standard techno backbone where you have the kick and the hat on the offbeat. So they're bouncing off each other, and then between those beats, we have this hat idea, which is creating a bit of swing and a bit of rhythm. If we actually go into the MIDI clip itself, you can see I've added a little bit of swing in those 16th notes where it's just off, and it adds like a looseness and a bit of flavor to it, which is always nice. I think the rhythm itself is quite Latin orientated, so I think it needs that little bit of swing, as though it's being played. So if we hear that together, yeah, it's just dancing around those notes, and it's never actually on the main beat, so that it's avoiding that kick completely, giving that its own space to live in. So if we listen to those elements together with the kick. So that's the hat group. And the processing we got on this looks pretty simple. It looks like I've just got a FabFilter Pro Q, or Pro Q2, and I'm just EQing it really simply, nothing too extreme. I don't want to change the sound of the sample. I want to keep it sounding really natural, so I'm just cutting it where it really wants to be cut. So this is a really functional EQ. So I'm just getting rid of that low end that you can see just piling up around there, so it doesn't muddy our mix. So that's just sitting nicely, not too intricate. We've got something here again on here. There we go. That sounds about right. I'm bringing out the tops a little bit here, just giving a bit more of those air frequencies, just adding a little bit of clarity, which I'm doing the same with this virtual mix rack, so I use this a lot. I've talked about that already, I think. But in this case, I'm just adding this SSL EQ, which I think Waves do a version as well, but I much prefer the Slate Digital version, to be honest. I think it adds a bit more color, it's got a bit more character to it. So yeah, with this, I'm really just bringing out those air frequencies and a bit of the mids, the top mids as well. And then that's going through into a saturation compressor. And yeah, again, not pushing it too hard, just adding a little bit of pressure and a bit of character, but nothing too much. Just letting the sample itself sing, which is what you want, I think. It's really important to just have those samples at their best rather than trying to make them something they're not. So yeah, just a few little units there, just bringing out those samples and nothing too heavy. And then a utility, which I use on most buses and most channels. In this case, it's not actually doing anything, but I might just drop it on there anyway in case I want to automate the volume of this rather than automating the volume on the channel itself or the bus. You can do it with the utility, and you're not going to tie yourself up in a pickle later on where you go to mix down and you need to change those channel faders just by hand. If you automate that, you're going to have a nightmare. So it's really important to use either a limiter or a utility or something to automate the volume itself. So I pretty much drop that on every channel. And then just underneath this hat idea, we've got this snare, which is reinforcing that rhythm that we heard earlier. So I do that a lot. If there's like quite a prominent rhythm that I really want to stand out, then I'll add an 808 snare, which it just tends to blend really well with hats, I think. And you also get that punch in the low mids. So if we go and jump into this EQ here, so again, this is just a basic 808 snare. Let's have that play. Yeah, and you can see it's got that high end, but it's also got that little punch in the 200 hertz region. And I'm just being careful to cut around that, so I'm just cutting below that, around 130, 140. So we're hearing that nice 200 hertz punch come through. And if we listen to it with the other hat, and then all together, yeah, it's really helping it punch through. So then we've just got this 909 hat sound, which is really quite heavy, and it's been distorted, and it's meant to be quite a harsh, primitive sound, just really cutting through everything. Obviously a really basic rhythm, just following the kick. Let's see what processing we got here. So yeah, it's just a basic open 909 hi-hat, which is then going through to the stock Ableton overdrive, and that's being pretty heavily distorted. So what I've then driven that through into the FabFilter Pro Q, and you've got to be careful when cutting or EQing after distortion. Always EQ after the distortion, because the distortion units add a lot of odd and even harmonics to the tops, but also to the lows. So you need to make sure that you're cutting those lows out so you don't get the muddy mix at the end of it. And then we've just got it going through into an autopan, which I use a lot again. Just adding a little bit of movement, nothing too much. The amount's around 30%, and the rate's pretty slow. So you can't really hear it as a prominent effect, but it's more just adding a little bit of movement. So yeah, let's see what else we've got below that. So also in this hack group that I can talk about is this little idea, which I'm pretty sure I'm just using the vocoder as well, but it's basically a hat, but I'm not using it like a hat. It's more of an effect. It's more of a build, really. And you can see the vocoders on there as well, just increasing the release, making it more and more intense. The main effect on here is really the meta flanger, which is by waves. It sounds amazing, and you can play with the rate and the decay, the feedback, which you can get really gnarly sort of resonances with. But also I love it because you can play with the stereo on here, so you can make it mono, or you can make it, you can really widen up the sound. I think here it's quite wide. It's just adding just a little bit more intensity. Yeah, nothing too crazy, just helping it build and build. Giving away the track there. Okay, so beneath that we've just got this sort of synth bed that's just keeping it rolling, keeping it going. It's adding a bit of structure to those mids, but because it's really quite a static sound, I'm just playing 16th notes on an ARP. It's the same note again and again. Because of that, you need to add some sort of dynamic in another way, just to keep it moving, so it doesn't feel like we're hearing the same sound again and again. So yeah, we've got this fairly basic one. It's just made with the SEM, and again, it's just the ARP that's playing a simple 16th note passage. Bit of chorus on there, nothing too crazy. And then the one beneath it, you can hear alone. Very similar sound, but the parameters are slightly different. We've got a bit more overdrive and a bit more chorus. And then we've got this pitch modulation just on the frequency here, so you can hear we can make it even more extreme, but we don't really want to. We want to keep it so it's playing. We can hear that audible note playing, but the pitch is just allowing it to just dance around it in a subtle way. So it's adding tension. It's not adding too much of a crazy effect. It's just adding a little bit of tension. And it's also sort of contributing to the flanger effect. It's kind of they're doing a similar job, but in a different way. I've also got an autopan on here, so that's more movement left to right. Basic EQing, probably just cutting the lows. Yeah, you can see there. We've got a compressor here, yeah, which is tied to the kick. It's not a functional compressor. I'm not using the sidechain functionally. I'm using it as an effect, basically, to add more movement. This time in the volume, so it's going pumping up and down. Again, not too much, just a little bit. You can hear that with, and then without. It changes the sound quite a bit, I think. Let's go back. There you go. So you can hear it just pumping, just a little touch there. And then, as I say, going through this meta flanger, which is adding just a touch of a sort of spacey left and right, which I really like. I use that a lot. So yeah, with all these things, we're just adding a little bit of dynamic to something that's otherwise quite static. So what I wanted with these, I wanted some structure and just consistent sound to sort of rely on in the background. But again, you got to keep it moving and keep it interesting, so you don't feel like you're hearing the same thing again and again. It is moving in some way. So that's when this main idea comes in, this moog, and this is the first time you hear it in the track. And we're already 2.5 minutes in, pretty much, even 3 minutes maybe. And we're hearing this moog sound, which I've just made on the Sub 37 there, just by doing a little pitch bend. I can show you how I made it in a minute. But for me, this is the hook of the track, and I'm usually a melody guy, and there's usually sort of different layers melodically going on, but this is really just sort of a primitive, very basic percussive drum track, and it just works. It works in the club so well, and I think the more stuff you make like this, you realize that actually just the very basic, pumping, very drummy tracks work the best, because it's dance music after all, and I suppose we're in a way programmed to dance to rhythms. See if we have a little listen to it together. So that hat is kind of reinforcing this bass as well. It's only coming in when this bass comes in, so we hear those together. So it really adds an intensity to it, and then it just stops. So yeah, so that's something I think is really important, having that contrast in a track. Let everything breathe, and then add more intensity, and then take it away. I think that's really effective. So yeah, the bass was just put together pretty quickly on this, I think. It's simple 2 oscillators, then with a sub underneath. I think it's just saw waves, it's just 2 sawtooths. You can see it's really the filter that gives it that character. So I'm just opening and closing the filter while I play with the pitch modulation here. And then we go up 3 steps. So let's see what I've recorded in. So it sounds like the 2 oscillators are actually, they're sort of like binaural beats. They're sort of weaving around each other, so we can change that parameter here with the beat frequency. So we can add a bit more, get more of a sort of re-space. That's more like it. Really quite dirty. Let's tweak that a little bit. Yeah, so I would have just jumped straight on this and just had a play and come up with that, I think, pretty quickly. That's one of the things I love about this synth. It's just a pair of safe hands, really. You can jump on it and make something really good really quickly, and it's just solid. You know it's going to be good. So this is definitely my go-to synth for basses. So yeah, I'm pretty sure I would have just jumped on this and within 10 minutes had something to work from at least. And that takes us to, I guess, this little melodic motif, which is really the only melodic idea in the track, which I've just used the SEM for. I bounced this version down, but I've got the original synth here, which we can open up and have a look at. Yeah, so I think I've taken this preset Acid Binge and just made my own little ARP passage with this 8-voice programmer, which is brilliant. It doesn't work the traditional way, so you're not using keys to create a melody, you're using sort of percentages across each note. So 0 is, I guess you could say, middle C if you're playing that note. And then minus 100% would be the octave below C, and then plus 100% would be the above octave. So you can get some interesting ideas, mainly atonal, it's not too geared around traditional melody, obviously, because it's made in this way, which is not traditional at all. But here I have stuck to a sort of classical idea of a melody, I guess. It's just very simple 8 notes, but it's quite hypnotic, I think. I mean, I'm a melody guy, like I always feel like I have to add some sort of melodic motif to my tracks. So the processing on this is just cutting the lows again, and then adding this outer space module, which is a great little thing from let's see the company. I think it's Audio Thing. Yeah, so the company's Audio Thing. Never heard of them before, but this little module is amazing. It's a remake of the Roland Space Echo, which I don't have yet, but I will one day. In the meantime, this is wicked. I love using this. They've really nailed that sort of tape echo feel. If you ever play with the repeat rate, you get that sort of pitch bending, which you do in the real module as well. Yeah, really cool. You get some super trippy, spacey effects there, which are always fun. And that's it with the processing on that. And then I think I just bounced it down. I think the SEM can, it's been modeled to be unpredictable. So I think the original, if you went back to a sound or tried to make the same sound, it's very hard to do because the oscillators are always slightly changing, and they maybe change with temperature as well. So the sound you get out is always slightly different. So I think that's what they tried to do here. So the SEM VST can change. I think I've just bounced it down. So I knew I loved this sound that I had here, and I just didn't want that to change. So when I go back to the project, it's always the same. So I think I just bounced it down, or I just recorded it through, which I often do as well. And then I think, yeah, you can see I've just EQ'd it again, and then added a little bit of reverb that increases over time. With the build, you can see I automate a lot of these effects. Delays, reverbs are always good to automate in breaks to add intensity. I also use the send. I also automate the sends and returns. So you can see here I've got this return going into sort of like the verb suite. So my setup is my return tracks are quite simple. I've got the basic Ableton reverb here, which is just at 100%. It's quite a big reverb, and that's sort of a functional reverb. Like I'm just adding touches of that to things. Nothing too crazy. I don't really want to hear the reverb too much. It's just adding a little bit of atmosphere to the background to certain elements. And then we've got the EQ8, the delay, which has an EQ8 just to cut the low before it goes through the delay. It's just a basic Ableton delay in the second return track there. And then the verb suite by Slate Digital, which I love, which I think is a sampled reverb unit. And I think they've just sampled loads of different sounds in various rooms and halls, and you can select those different types of halls, the different types of reverbs, even the length. So yeah, this is a lot more comprehensive, I think. It's a lot more characterful. So if I'm going to have a reverb that people are going to hear, it's going to be a big reverb. I want to use this one. So down here we've got this little hidden percussive idea, which is just sort of hiding below all the musical bits. Probably because I added it much later, I just threw it on. So let me just talk you through. It looks like these are actually loops that I've cut up and made my own little sample idea from. So if we drag these loops out and see what they are originally, so I think it's 2 different loops. Let's have a look. So that's the first one. Oh, okay. So yeah, I've just taken little bits that I've liked from those, and I've created my own little pattern that fits in with my track. I mean, using loops is great, but often it's likely it's not going to work with what's going on with the rest of your track. So it's good to maybe get inspiration from a loop and then cut little bits out, which I do a lot, and this is what I've done here. So playing it all together. Yeah, so you got these little knocks that are just coming at the end of every little 4-bar loop, and just creating a little bit more sort of primitive dancey feel, like we're all sort of dancing around a fire or something like that. Yeah, I love a bit of woodblock. So yeah, just processing it with a basic compressor, nothing too crazy. You can see it's just bringing it down a little bit there, a gain reduction. EQing, again cutting the lows. I can see I've cut a little bit of this, is it 7,000 region, 6,000, which is usually an area of sibilance. So if you've got a vocalist, the S's tend to hang around 6,000-7,000. So anything like that to our ears sounds quite harsh and intense. I think it's probably that sound that I wanted to cut a little bit, so there's no sort of really harsh hissing. Just really just focusing on that woodblock. And then just the sausage fattener again. Adding a little bit of compression and saturation, and also a bit of tightness, and that's all you really want. Again, just letting the sample sing. So yeah, I've taken all these different ideas and really given them their own space. So when it comes to the mix, it should be easy. You're not letting or you're not having too many ideas crossing over each other and interacting with each other. They should all sit rhythmically and mix-wise in their own little space. So when you listen to it all together, I think I probably mixed it as I went along, which I usually do because I want to hear how the track is going to sound as I'm going. And you can hear there's not too many elements until this really heavy groove comes in. Yeah, so there's still a lot of space in the mix, I think. I think that's important as well for mixing into other tracks and out of other tracks, and when you come to actually mixing down the track itself, it really just it's an easy job basically, and you've got a much better chance of making a really good piece of music that sounds great on the dance floor. So the most important thing, of course, is the kick. So I'm really focusing on that in terms of the mix, making sure that stands out the most. It really does it itself, I think, with the way I've added this woody kick, which really comes through everything. It really cuts through everything rather, and points the way down to that subby end. So it's really important to make sure that clicky sound in the top of the kick is punching through and really audible. And then of course it has to sing nicely with the bass. So you can see here that you can hear they're dancing around each other really nicely, and we talked about this earlier. But these two elements are really
really should be the focus of a mixing engineer, and should be considered the most important elements when mixing down a club track, just because the sub is going to completely fill the room, and if they're not sounding good, then the track's just going to struggle. So they need to be absolutely on point. And then everything just sitting nicely around it. Like these I do with the percussion, almost just highlighting the kick in a way. Yeah, so there's not too much going on. It sounds quite intense, but there's not so many elements and rhythmic ideas that it's becoming overwhelming. Everything, like I said, needs to have its own space, and you should have something that will sound good on a dance floor.
Thanks for watching. That was my track Counterculture, which has just landed. So feel free to go and buy that, that's fine. And maybe I'll see you again.